Ceilings. In this video, we'll learn how to model ceilings in Revit. To begin with, I will create some walls. Not only 4 walls, but we'll add another room within these 4 walls, 2 rooms. To create a ceiling, we'll go to our Architecture tab, Build panel, and the ceiling tool is right here. One thing to keep in mind when creating a ceiling is you'll want to, in your project browser, go to your ceiling plan, not your floor plan. Often, we'll create a ceiling and not be able to see it, and the mistake will be that we'll be looking at the floor plan, that is, looking down, when we should be at our ceiling plan, looking up. I'll double-click Level 1 Ceiling Plan now, and as you can see, it looks just like the floor plan, but instead of looking down, we are looking up. We'll go back to our Architecture tab, Build Panel, Ceiling, and we'll select that tool. There are 2 ways to sketch the boundary of your ceiling. Like floors, to create a ceiling, we'll go into Sketch mode and sketch the boundary. Also, if we take a look at the Properties palette, we can look at the different types of ceilings that are loaded into Revit. There are just a couple: a generic ceiling, a 2x2, and a 2x4, and chipboard on metal stud. The ACT system is acoustical ceiling tile, and that is what you normally find in office buildings. We'll go ahead and select the 2x4 so we can see what it looks like when we add the ceilings into our model. Of the 2 types of tools we can use to sketch our ceiling, one is automatic and one is sketching. We'll start with the automatic to see and show how fast creating ceilings in Revit can be. Once we've selected the type of ceiling and the tool that we're going to use to create the ceiling, if we just go into a closed room, you can see the red boundary is showing where the ceiling will be. If I left click, I have now created a ceiling. Let's go ahead and go back to the ceiling tool, and instead of an automatic ceiling, you can see how fast it is. If I just hover inside the enclosed space, the outline shows me where the ceiling will be. But I can also sketch a ceiling. And just like floors, I'm in sketch mode. You can see the red X and the green check. I'll be drawing the boundary line, and I can use any of these tools, including the Pick Walls tool, to create the boundary. The Pick Walls tool is the most popular choice because if a wall moves, the ceiling will move with it. So we'll go ahead and select that wall, this wall, and this wall. And like floors, we need a closed boundary, so we'll trim out these 2 lines. We'll also need to bring this boundary, to the other side of this wall, so it's on the inside walls of this room. Finish sketch mode with the check, and you can see that I have a ceiling. If I want to select this ceiling and modify it, I can go near the border, and you can see when I'm near the border, the blue border is highlighted. If I left click, I've now highlighted and selected that ceiling. I can go to my edit boundary and go back into sketch mode, and now I can modify that ceiling. It doesn't have to be to the boundary of the walls. I could cut it short if I wanted to in one corner, trim that, and I could even put a hole in the ceiling if I wanted. As long as I have a closed boundary on the outside and closed boundaries on the inside, Revit will create the ceiling. Finish the sketch mode, look at it in 3D, and you can see that I have a ceiling here and here. Now I don't see the pattern for the ceiling because that is on the bottom side of the ceiling where people would normally see it. That's the 2x4 grid with the hole and the peel back from the corner. I can also select one of these grids and rotate it, say 45 degrees, and it'll rotate all of the grids. Or I can highlight one of the grids and actually move it and recenter these grid lines. Just like the floor tool, when I'm in sketch mode for ceiling, I can use a slope arrow to slope the ceiling. I can go from side to side or from corner to corner. While I'm in sketch mode, I add the slope arrow. I can highlight that slope arrow and define the slope either by an offset at the height of the tail or the offset of the height at the head, or I can define a slope. We can define the slope down here, let's say 6 and 12. Hit OK, look at it in 3D, and you can see, obviously, that I have applied a slope to that ceiling. I'm going to go ahead and highlight that ceiling, edit the boundary, and remove the slope arrow, finish sketch mode, and now I'm my flat ceiling again. Now let's take a look at modifying the ceiling type. If I highlight the ceiling, just like the floors, I can edit the type properties, go to the structure, I can even preview the structure as I create a new ceiling type. And here's where I can modify the structure or the finishes. Keep in mind with the ceiling, the bottom of these rows, this is what you'll be seeing from within the ceiling plan, or if you were standing on the ground looking up. So we could change the acoustical ceiling tile to, let's say, chipboard. We'll add a surface pattern to that chipboard. A gypsum plaster texture. And we'll hit OK. So we not only changed the texture, we changed the material to the gypsum wallboard. And it's 5/8, and that's correct. And we might want to change the structure material to a stud. Let's say we'll look for wood stud. Or we'll just use a wood. Let's see. Here we go. Structure wood joist or rafter. We'll probably want to change the color of it. Hit OK. And instead of 1 5/8, we'll do a 2x4, so 3.5 inches thick or deep. And you can look over here, we've got 5/8 of chipboard at the bottom, and it's on a wood rafter. If we hit OK, we'll want to rename this. Actually, we'll duplicate it. And instead of a 2x4 AC system, we can just say a chipboard on stud. And now we've created a new ceiling type, and you can see that it's got the new pattern on it. So again, just like floors, you can highlight the ceiling, go to the type properties, go to the structure, and add or modify the rows or the layers that make up the ceiling type. We haven't talked about the instance parameters of the ceilings yet. If you highlight one of the ceilings, again, in our properties palette, you can look at the instance parameters. In this case, you can see that the associated level is level 1, and the height offset is 8 feet. So this ceiling is 8 feet from the floor to the bottom of the very first layer. You can see that it is room bounding, And really the only other things that are left for the instance parameters are the phase created and the phase demolished. So we could change the height of that ceiling if we wished to 9 feet. You see that it got raised up a little bit from the other ceiling, which is still at 8 feet. If we go to our ceiling plan, we can tag the ceilings by going to our Annotate tab and our Annotate tab, tag category, or sorry, tag panel, and we can tag by category. If we hover on a ceiling, I'm going to go ahead and uncheck the leader box. If we hover on a ceiling, Revit asks if we want to load a ceiling tag. We do, and we'll go to Annotations, Architectural, and there should be a ceiling tag with height, and we can go ahead and load that in. Now, as we hover over a ceiling, we can see that it calls out the type of ceiling and the height the ceiling is above finished floor. I'm going to go ahead and delete that tag to show you there's also not only tag by category, but there's a tag all button. If I select the tag all and select ceiling tags and apply it, you can see that it tags all the ceilings in that view. And that's how you tag ceiling heights and tag all the ceilings that are not tagged. And finally for this video, let's talk about ceilings attached to floors. If we create a section view through this building, and we take a look at the section view, let's go ahead and create the scale higher, and we can see that we have a gypboard on a stud layer. One question that arises in looking at the ceiling and thinking about the floor above it is, should we model the floor, say carpet over plywood, with this rafter space here, and then apply a gypboard ceiling to it as a ceiling tool? Or should I include the ceiling as part of the floor assembly, or include the floor, the carpet, and the plywood as part of the ceiling assembly? In my experience, it is best to have the gypboard ceiling separate from the floor. So we should create a floor assembly that includes, say, carpet or tile over plywood over the joist. And then we should come in with just a gypboard ceiling and attach it to the floor assembly. This I recommend this mainly because the lighting or the lights in Revit are attached to the ceiling, and so you need to create a ceiling by itself for the lighting to attach themselves to. So you cannot create a gypboard ceiling as part of the floor assembly and have the lights in Revit attached to it. So quickly, let's take a look at how we might do that. I'm going to go ahead and take this ceiling. I'm going to select it. I'm going to look at the drop-down menu and see if there's any just gypboard, and there's not. So I'll duplicate the ceiling that I've created and just call it gypboard. Hit OK. I'll go to my structure, and I'll need to move my gypboard in between the core boundaries. And I'll delete the structure, because the structure will now become part of our floor assembly. Now remember, I moved the gypboard in between the core boundaries because this illustrates the minimum amount of layers you can have for a ceiling type, just like the floors and just like the walls. You have to have one material, or one row, in between the two core boundaries. When I hit OK and OK, you can see that I'm just left with a gypboard ceiling. Now I'm going to go to my level 2 plan and create a floor. Again, Architecture tab, Build Panel, Floor, and I'll look for a wood joist with ceramic tile. I can select all the walls, finish my sketch mode. Say no to that. And if I look in 3D, you can see that I have a a floor made up of wood joists with ceramic tile above it. I'm going to go ahead and change this floor to wood joists with a wood finish, just so it looks a little bit better. I'm going to go back to my section. You can see here, if I select this, that is my wood floor from here to here, and my ceiling is down here. Now in real life, the ceiling would be nailed to these joists, so I'm going to use my Align tool to align that ceiling to that floor and lock that relationship. So now, if the floor moves, that ceiling will follow. I can highlight the level, and let's say we raise that level to 12 feet from 10. Well, you can see that the floor went up and the ceiling went along with it. And so that is how I normally do a residential floor assembly with ceiling.